Hey, welcome along. Do you dig the fake hate crimes? There's a lot of it about at the moment. This guy in Chicago in the big TV show Empire, Jussie Smollett, and as you know, he claimed that he'd been beaten up by two white guys, Trump supporters, wearing "Make America Great Again" hats. And they'd put a noose around his neck, and they also had some bleach that they threatened to use on him. This was an interesting news story because it was a sub-zero night in Chicago, January 29th, at the time of the polar vortex. And bleach, for what it's worth, freezes at 19 degrees Fahrenheit. So a lot of reasons why this story seemed odd if you just looked at it, but nobody did. The media were all hot for it. Nancy Pelosi went bananas for it. The Democrat presidential candidates did. Kamala Harris, Cory Booker compared it to a modern day lynching. And then the story began to disintegrate, and it turned out instead of being beaten up by two white guys from MAGA country, he was instead beaten up by two black guys from Africa, from Nigeria, as it happens, who had been apparently given $3,500 to beat him up. I mean, let's stop and consider this for a moment. Jussie Smollett is gay and black. And so the idea was that this was a hate crime. And he was beaten up by two white guys, and instead the two white guys turned out to be two black guys from Nigeria. Rather hunky black guys, actually in terrific shape, because they're friends of his who work out at a gym he owns, apparently. As you can see, they're impeccably ripped. From Nigeria, doing the jobs that Americans won't do, like beating up black gay guys or gay black guys, according to whichever your priority is. And he paid them $3,500 with another $500 to come after they'd finished the job. That was his mistake. He shouldn't have paid them so much money up front, otherwise the story wouldn't have unraveled quite the way it did. But you have to think about this. He's in Chicago, where people are violently attacked all week long, every weekend. Dozens and dozens of people get shot, and this is the only guy who actually has to pay somebody $4,000 to whack him. That's how bad. That's how little hate. That's how little homophobia and racism there is in Chicago. Everybody else is too busy shooting each other on a non-racial, non-homophobic basis that this guy has to pay two Nigerians $4,000 to beat the crap out of him. And in an hilarious touch to this fake hate crime, and I sympathize. If you are thinking about planning a fake hate crime, you do have to pay attention to detail. I mean, all this guy wanted was for two white guys to beat him up. And you think that sounds easy in a country as riddled with hate and racism as it is, as this country is. But it's more difficult than it seems. I mean, I asked two white guys to beat me up. Unfortunately, I was in Virginia and I asked the Democrat governor and the Democrat attorney general. And unfortunately, they were wearing blackface because they were on their way to the annual DNC minstrel show. And so it didn't look right when it was caught on the security cameras. It's very difficult. You've got to pay a lot of close attention when you're trying to organize a fake hate crime. And this all worked out swell, though, because this is hilarious. The United States Senate passed an anti-lynching bill on the very day that Jussie Smollett's story began to unravel. And it turns out that the gay black guys are being beaten up by Nigerians coming into the country to do the jobs that Americans won't do. On the very day it all unraveled, Senator Kamala Harris, Democrat of California, and Cory Booker, Democrat of New Jersey, and Tim Scott, Republican of South Carolina, passed in the Senate America's first anti-lynching bill. And Cory Booker cited the Jussie Smollett fake non-lynching as a reason why they needed to pass this lynching bill, because lynching is not a relic of the past. Lynching is the most pressing issue facing America today. If I understand Senator Booker correctly, you know, this new lynching that Jussie Smollett paid for, he paid these two Nigerian guys $4,000 to beat the crap out of him, and that's not, you know, but a lot of people can't afford that. You might want to have a couple of Nigerians beat you up, but you've only got $2,000. It could be a big problem. Anyway, the Senate, in honor of the fake hate crime of Jussie Smollett, passed a federal anti-lynching law. It would have been funnier if they'd done like they do with some of these laws and actually called it Jussie's law. The fakeophobia is a big thing now, and the reason we have it is because the media fall for it every time. And before we had all these isms and phobias, you know, now we got the racism, the sexism, the Islamophobia, the homophobia, the transphobia. They used to call it, in the old days, before racism, they used to call it prejudice. Not that long ago. They used to say, he's a bit colour prejudiced. He's a prejudiced person. Prejudice. You don't hear the word these days because we got all the isms and phobias now. But what we have now actually is real prejudice, as in the root of the word, which means to prejudge something, to judge something in advance. So instead of waiting to hear all the evidence, weighing the evidence and adjudicating the matter properly, we prejudicate it, prejudice. And that's the age we live in now, where once you know the identities of the persons involved, this guy is a big star on telly, big black gay television star. So if he claims to have been beaten up, he's the victim, and these other guys who did it, they're the bad guys. We prejudge the issue. Likewise, in the Covington High School business, with the Covington Catholic School, with the kids on the mall confronting the so-called tribal elder in their MAGA hats. He wasn't actually a tribal elder. I think he's like a couple of years older than me. He's like a tribal late middle-aged, whatever you call. I don't know whether that's a category, an official category among Indian tribes, but he seems a bit young. Seems a bit callow to be a tribal elder. Tribal late middle-aged. That's the vibe he gives off. And once you knew the other guy was tribal, late middle-aged, then the guys in the MAGA hats are the bad guys. This is literal prejudice, in that we assign guilt and innocence based on the identity group categories the guys fall into. And in the case of the Jussie Smollett thing, of course, he had to make it up. He couldn't actually hire. You would think if this country was so hatey, racy, racist and homophobic and transphobic and thisophobic and thatophobic, you wouldn't need to pay $4,000 to find someone who could beat the crap out of you. It'd be a lot easier than that. But instead, he had to import a couple of guys from Nigeria to do it. It's interesting to me the way the post, since we all became supposedly anti-racist, we now obsess about it all the time. I mean, I don't know what's up with this guy. I don't know what kind of situation you'd have to be in. It's actually 29 people, apparently, because he was a big celebrity, 29 coppers in the Chicago PD worked on his case, which is an extraordinary number of policemen to take out a commission on some time-wasting self-hate crime in a city where everybody's shooting each other all the time. But it's the corollary of, it's what comes after racism. When anti-racism itself becomes prejudiced, and you live in a world where you can sucker the media every time. And the media, by the way, are being very disingenuous about this. If it's just an unfortunate error that they happen to fall for this guy's obviously fake story, then why is it that they fall the same way every time? In other words, they point the fingers at the people in the MAGA hats, whether they're Covington Catholic MAGA hat wearers or whether they're entirely fictional MAGA hat wearers, like these two very buff Nigerians Mr. Smollett happened to find. One of the reasons I think that once you have achieved the success that identity politics has, it becomes very difficult to stop, and you start obsessing more and more on micro identities. You also eventually turn on all the liberal whites who ushered in this brave new world of post-racial harmony. For instance, I see that Her Royal Highness the Duchess of Sussex, that's the former Miss Meghan Markle, as was, has backed calls to, quote, decolonize the curriculum of universities. She thinks too many. She was visiting some university somewhere the other day, and she looked at the photographs of the faculty, and she decided they were too male, pale, and stale. And so now she's backing this movement to so-called decolonize the curriculum of universities. Who the hell seriously thinks the problem with universities is that they require decolonization? They're the bastion of anti-colonialism. All the post-colonial, every Marxist dictator in Africa of the 1960s was a graduate of the London School of Economics. That's where they learn the Marxism with which they bless their newly liberated countries. The professors may be male, pale, and stale, but they're also all overwhelmingly left-wing. And yet the revolution marches on and comes for them. There's a new party in the United Kingdom, apparently. It turned. Don't worry, there'll be one along in another few minutes. They've left Jeremy Corbyn's Labour Party. Because they think, among other things, that Jeremy Corbyn's Labour Party is racist, because Jeremy Corbyn finds it hard, and a lot of the people around him find it even harder, to conceal the fact that they don't like Jews. If you think that Jews are a race apart, as evidently these people do. There's a democratic logic to that. Once you let in a certain number of Muslims to your country, and you believe in one man, one vote, and you're in the situation that the UK Labour Party is in, or a lot of the continental parties are in, then obviously the Muslims outvote the Jews. And it's unfortunately a fact of life that a lot of Muslims don't like Jews. But at any rate, Angela Smith was among those who left the Labour Party because it's racist. On the very first day of the new party, so the new party's only a few hours old, and she's on TV talking about race on the BBC's political shows. And she goes, it's not just about being black or a funny tinge from the BME community. And I think BME, I don't keep up on a lot of the acronyms in the United Kingdom, but I think BME means black and minority ethnic. I think it means anything, it's all categories except pale, male, and stale. Pale, male, and stale is in the dead white man category, and BME is black and minority ethnic. It's not just about being black or a funny tinge. And all of a sudden everyone's going, wait a minute, funny, did she just say funny tinge? And so within hours of forming her new party, because the Labour Party's too racist, Angela Smith is having to apologise for using the phrase funny tinge. And actually, as racist statements go, it's a fairly original one. Not many people in human history have actually said funny tinge. I actually did a Google search, and the last time I think I can find anyone using the phrase funny tinge was a review of the silent movie 3 Miles Out in the Journal News of Hamilton, Ohio on August the 8th, 1924. 3 Miles Out was playing at the Rialto. And the reviewer said, 3 Miles Out, full of humour. Even villains have their funny tinge in Story of Rum Runners. If you happen to see 3 Miles Out, as I said, it was a big hit in 1924. Played the Rialto in Hamilton, Ohio. Can't find a lot of evidence that anyone's used the phrase funny tinge since then, but Angela Smith did, to describe people of colour. And this is such a bizarre way of looking at it. And just to tie it back to the Jussie Smollett thing, you know, Jussie Smollett is a complicated person, obviously. Anybody who's willing to pay $4,000 to anybody else to beat them up, I'd have beaten him up for like $800 tops. Anyone who feels the need to pay $4,000 to somebody to beat them up is obviously a very strange person. But the media can't use that excuse. And so the interesting thing I find about this is the number of media commentators and big shot politicians like Cory Booker, who don't just say, wow, what an appalling thing, what a bizarre, freakish thing on a sub-zero night in Chicago to be set upon by a couple of footpads of ne'er-do-wells who happen to be carrying a noose and bleach. Instead of just saying this is some hideous one-off, they're saying this is America in 2019, to quote one of them. And that's what makes it nuts. That even if you bought this guy's story, it would be a freakish one-off. What turns it into the level of mass insanity is the American media insisting that this is who we are in 2019. And it reveals the disconnect between them and the half of the country that supports President Trump. If you just walk around, if you sit in a diner booth, if you go to a restaurant, if you talk to someone at the gas station, or the Elks Lodge, or wherever, and you say, well, why do you support Donald Trump? Is it because you're a racist? Is it because you're itching to beat up the black gay guys on television? You would not say this is America in 2019 if you actually knew the people with whom you happen to share the country. And that's what I find interesting about Angela Smith talking about black minority ethnic community having a funny tinge. Do I think Angela Smith is racist? No, she's a socialist. She's on the Labour Party. She believes in the multicultural utopia. But she thinks the people who are racist, this is how they talk. And of course, nobody has talked, you could hardly find someone in living memory. This is the sort of thing, someone who lives in a remote Scottish crofting village in the late 19th century and joins the army and is suddenly sent to some ramshackle, dusty British colony on an island in the Pacific. And because he's lived in his little Scottish crofting village all his life and has never seen anybody who looks remotely different, he might think that the natives have a funny tinge. That's how you talk when you're a quote-unquote racist who's never seen anybody from any other race. So again, I find it interesting because the phrase, and as I said, nobody, this is an expression unique to Angela Smith, which is why it's going to hang around her neck, even as she issues apologies for misspeaking and all the rest of it. But it's interesting to me because it reveals the disconnect between her and the people she purports to govern. It's condescending because it implies that they have a sort of fear of the unknown, that they're not used to seeing people with funny tinges. Whereas, you know, people of every conceivable tinge are now to be found in the streets of every Western city. Every Western city. I was in Kemi, up in the Bay of Bothnia, southern Greenland. Basically nothing between, it's where Sweden and Finland meet, nothing between there and Santa's Grotto at the North Pole. And you see people walking around there in Middle Eastern dress because they've had some so-called refugees and everything. You know, you can't find anywhere in the Western world where that is a naive and condescending view of the people you purport to govern. We've got too much of this. And I think these fake hate crimes, it's worth stepping back and actually thinking about whether we need this category at all. Because the more we have identity politics, the more we will require a powerful state to mediate relations between the groups. Because that's what we've seen now, that it's not enough that we all live in some rainbow-hued utopia. What it means is that, as with Angela Smith, you make one infelicitous remark and the eggshells crumble underneath the tippy toes you're walking on, and you're consumed as a hater. The incident that always embodied it for me was a few years back. Sir Iqbal Sakrani, who's a big Muslim lobby group guy in the UK, and obviously a Muslim of such impeccable moderation that he's been knighted by the Queen, Sir Iqbal Sakrani. He was on the BBC, and he said that Muslims didn't like homosexuals because they were filthy and immoral and spread disease. And so he was investigated by Scotland Yard for homophobia. Simultaneously, GALA, the Gay and Lesbian Humanist Association, said that Muslims didn't like homosexuals because they were filthy and immoral and spread disease. And Scotland Yard investigated the gay guys for Islamophobia. So you got that? A Muslim and a gay guy say exactly the same thing. And the Muslim gets investigated for homophobia, and the gay guy gets investigated for Islamophobia. And that's why I'm phobiaphobic, because tiptoeing around on identity group eggshells incentivizes fake hate crimes, and almost inevitably requires an ever larger bureaucracy to police the ever-shrinking bounds of discourse. Because, as we saw with Angela Smith, just two words can total you. So I'm phobiaphobic, and I'm also fakeophobic. In a certain sense, a land where you have to pay a black gay celebrity has to pay immigrants $4,000 to beat him up. And I mean, this is good. If you're like an immigrant and you're thinking, I've come to America and there's nothing to do but seasonal fruit picking and leaving the little chocolate on the turned down covers in the lousy motels and all the rest of it, you think to yourself, and if you're on a caravan in Honduras and you're thinking, is it worth coming all the way to America? You can get $4,000 to beat up a celebrity in a city where everybody is too busy shooting each other to beat up the black gay guys. Hallelujah. What a great day in America. I hope I live long enough to see an end to all of this, because, as I said, I'm phobiaphobic and I'm fakeophobic. Dennis Miller and I are currently touring Pennsylvania and New York State. And we might be in your neighborhood if you happen to be in, I think we'll end with the promo from I can never say the name of this town. What is it? Wilkes-Barre, Wilkes-Barre, Wilkes-Borough, Wilkes-Barre, Wilkes-Barre. The Wilkes bit I'm on top of. But I keep getting conflicting advice on the other part. Anyway, we're going to be there in a few days' time, and we hope to see you. So I will leave you with that, and we will see you next time.
Dennis Miller, Mark Steyn, The Adorable Deplorable Tour.
Ever notice all the people telling Trump to quit tweeting, do so on Twitter?
Dennis Miller and Mark Steyn joined together for one wild night.
Elizabeth Warren is so two-faced she can simultaneously open a pair of iPhone 10s.
Saturday, March 2nd, FM Kirby Center for the Performing Arts.
Tickets available at the box office.
Ticketmaster.com.
800-745-3000.
And AdorableDeplorableTour.com.